DATV, and the Greater Dayton Area League of Women Voters present Meet the Candidates, your chance to learn about the candidates running for office in the November election.
Hello, I am Erin O'Brien, a member of the League of Women Voters of the Greater Dayton area. I am here with candidates running for the office of Ohio House District 43. The term of office is 2 years and the base salary for this position is $60,584. There are two candidates running for this position. Those candidates are Dan Foley and Jeffrey Todd Smith. We will start our interviews by having the candidates tell us about themselves and why they want to serve as state representative. They will have 2 minutes for opening remarks. Dan, let's start with you.
Well, thank you. Thanks again to the League for providing this opportunity for Todd and I to share why we want to get elected to the State House. So I've been in public service for close to 25 years. For the past 12 years, I've served as a Montgomery County Commissioner. Prior to that, I was the elected clerk of courts for Montgomery County. I've been married to my wife Kathleen for 25 years. She's a school teacher for the Springfield School District. We have 2 daughters. I really want to go to Columbus to focus on trying to put money back into local governments, because we've got issues like the opiate crisis. We've got issues like supporting police and fire and building up communities. Where Columbus has really taken a lot of money away from local communities. I want to be a champion for mental health reform, and I also want to work to try to really maximize economic development and workforce development for the 43rd District, which includes Northwest Montgomery County and all of Preble County. And so I believe I've learned a lot at the local level, and I believe I've got a curiosity about how to do things better. And at the end of the day, I believe that government can play a decent role in people's lives. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Todd, please tell me about yourself and why you would like to serve as state representative.
Well, as Dan said, thank you to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to introduce ourselves to your organization and to numerous other people here in Dayton, Ohio. My name is Todd Smith. I was born and raised right here in Southwest Ohio. My parents are from Hazard, Kentucky, so I was raised in a large family that believed in love, discipline, and hard work. We were taught to respect authority, to honor the country, and to serve other people. I've been married for 25 years to my wife, Jennifer, and we've raised all 4 of our children in Valley View schools right here in the 43rd District. Jennifer and I have spent our lives serving others in 12 countries around the world and from coast to coast in 40 different states in this great country. And for the past 21 years, we've pastored the church in Farmersville, recently becoming a multi-campus site church. And we pastor also a church in Westchester. I graduated with honors from Cincinnati Christian University with 2 degrees. What that means is our entire adult lives have been spent serving people from every strata of society, regardless of gender, race, or economic standing. We've invested our lives and been actively involved in our local communities. And this is one of the main reasons I jumped into this race, and that is to serve. In our nation, it seems to be a growing distance between the people and their elected political leaders. And that distance seemingly is increasing because a lot of people in Preble and Montgomery counties feel like their politicians aren't representing them or their best interests. And that's why I jumped into the political realm. I want to be a representative and work for the people. And I think a lot of times we forget what politicians are supposed to be. We're supposed to be the servants of the people. And many have forgotten that. So my job will be this. It will be to represent you in District 43 to Columbus, not to represent Columbus to the District 43. We have to change this top-down mentality of our state politics. And as your representative, I give you this promise. I will be accessible, I will be engaged, I will listen, and I will serve. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Todd, special interests spend immense sums of money in Columbus on lobbying and donations to campaigns. They must report what or whom they are lobbying for or against, but they are not required to report the real-world spending. Do you support full disclosure of who is spending how much to influence our representatives?
Absolutely.
Okay, same question, Dan.
I would agree.
You would agree? Thank you. Okay, question 2, Dan. The government recently transferred over $6.5 million into the state's rainy day fund. Ohio already had more than $2 billion in reserve. State funding to communities and counties has been cut, forcing local governments to reduce services and increase sales taxes. Should some of that money be used to make lives better for millions of Ohioans?
Absolutely. And so there's been really a tax shift away from local communities to the state. And so your point about the rainy day fund is an example of that. And what's happened is people at the local level still demand services. They still want police and fire. They still want funding for economic development. In places like Dayton, Ohio, they still want funding for the arts. And so what's happened is all across the state, because there's been so much money taken out of local communities, citizens are saying we still want the things that we believe are going to keep our communities thriving. And so you've seen local tax increases. We, in fact, increased our sales taxes this summer after a series of public hearings, and people said to us, look, we want to continue to invest in things like preschool education. We want to continue to invest in things like economic development. And so you've seen local taxes increase because the state has really pulled out of local government funding. And so what I'm saying to people when I go to Columbus, I'm going to really advocate for trying to shift that pendulum back to local communities, right? To start to put more money, whether it's public education funding, whether it's local government funding, put more money from the state back into local communities, because our neighbors and our friends still believe that we need effective government at the local level. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Todd, do you think some of that money should be used to make lives better for millions of Ohioans?
Absolutely, and what you have to do, you have to take yourself back 8 years ago. 8 years ago, when our state was controlled by Democrats, we were at a very pivotal place economically. We were losing jobs, lost over 400,000 jobs, and everybody was economically depressed. So what had to happen, the state actually not only lost 400,000 jobs, we also were down to, I think it was 89 cents in the state rainy day fund or a state budget. That had to change. They needed money. So they cut some of the monies that they sent back to local communities. I believe with Dan, I believe this, the more local the government, the more effective. And the more money we keep out of Columbus, the better. So there has to be a way to understand that some of that money, now that the rainy day fund of the state is taken care of, some of that money does need to come back to here. We just got to make sure that we do it exponentially. We got to do it in the right way to make sure that everybody is helped. In this regard, because the state and every community had to take a cut. And I know that Commissioner Foley, had mentioned about raising taxes here. And the local communities had to take a cut, everybody had to take a cut. It was such economically hard times. So when you do that, you got to make hard decisions about where to spend that money. And I think that's the problem, because some of the loss that we've had here locally recently has been something that we knew was going to happen. We saw other counties who did not raise their taxes or did not raise their sales increase. So there is a way to do it to where everybody is helped and nobody is strained.
Thank you. Todd, Ohioans overwhelmingly voted for Issue 1 last year to draw compact contiguous district lines and eliminate the current gerrymandered districts. Are you a supporter of redrawing the district in an effort to promote fair elections? And would you support doing this prior to the 2020 election?
I did not support Issue 1. I do not support Issue 1. I would not want it done now or at any time. In this regard, you're going to have to cut lines somewhere. And the map that I recently saw was proportioned in such a way that it had large amounts of population in one area and less in other. Somewhere you're going to have to try to get these 99 districts down to representing the same amount of people. You will have to do what's called gerrymandering. I know that that is seen as a bad thing, but you're going to have to draw lines and divvy up certain portions of the population. Who's going to do that? That's my problem. My problem with Issue 1 is who's given that authority. Somebody's going to draw lines. Do I want my plumber to do it? I have a great plumber. He's not hired to do that. The state legislators are hired to do that. So who's in the state legislature? Whoever has the majority generally is the one making the final decision on that. What Issue 1 does is it gives too much authority to me, to people who maybe aren't representing the state because they're not winning elections, or to people who are unaccountable and not, or people who aren't voted on, who have no accountability to the citizens and the voters of Ohio. So there's a right way to do it, and I don't think farming it out or giving it to people who don't have the best interests of the state in mind is the way to do it. So I'm against Issue 1 back then. Still am.
Thank you. Dan, are you a supporter of redrawing the district in an effort to promote fair elections, and would you support doing this prior to the 2020 election?
I would, and I think for state legislative districts and also for congressional districts, I would take a slightly different tack on this. I believe that there should be a citizen-led panel that really looks at drawing these districts and really kind of removes the parties from this, because what happens is the party in power always feels like they have to, in my opinion, they have to draw these districts to favor their continuation of staying in power. And there have been some great, in fact, the League of Women Voters, if I'm not wrong, really advocated for a much stronger kind of an objective writing of these districts so that you have better policy. I mean, that's what this comes down to. The districts that are drawn, that are so skewed to one side or the other, there's no incentive for that person to reach across the aisle and to actually build policy that's going to impact the most people. And that's what's the biggest harm about gerrymandered districts, is that people who are elected don't have incentive to work on issues that matter to all of us. This is going back many years. In the mid-'60s, or early '60s, there was a Republican congressman from Piqua named Bill McCullough. He was credited with advancing civil rights legislation by the Kennedy administration and the Johnson. He was a Republican, and people look at that example of advocating across party lines, and I was moved reading about that, because that's what we need. We need districts that really incentivize elected officials to do the right thing and kind of work on bipartisan issues.
Thank you. The next series of questions may not necessarily apply to the office you are seeking, but it is simply another way to help voters know who you are. You are to respond to each question with only one word, yes or no. Remember that you will have the last word with a closing statement if you feel the need to elaborate on an answer. There are 6 questions. Are you in favor of universal health care, Dan?
Yes.
Are you in favor of universal health care, Todd?
Health care for all. That has to be. So, yes.
Todd, do you think that the government should be involved in the reproductive decisions of women?
If you're talking about, I hate to say yes or no, but these answers are going to be impossible to say yes or no. If you're talking about allowing people to have counsel, to have mammograms, to have those things, fine. If you're talking about abortion, I'm going to be against abortion every time.
Okay, we'll let you
elaborate
in your closing statement. That's fine. Yes, so is that a yes or a no?
You have to parse that question up. That's
okay.
impossible. I'm against abortion, but I'm going to help people any way we can.
Thank you. Dan, do you think that the government should be involved in the reproductive decisions of women?
Yes.
Dan, would you favor a ban on military-style assault rifles?
Yes.
Todd, would you favor a ban on military-style assault rifles?
No.
Todd, do you believe that man-made climate change is real?
It is a part of the equation.
Dan, do you believe that man-made climate change is real?
Yes.
Dan, are you in favor of term limits?
I am in favor of term limits.
Todd, are you in favor of term limits?
Yes, sorry.
So you're following my rule? No.
Okay. Todd, will you be voting for issue 1?
No.
Dan, will you be voting for issue 1?
I will. Yes.
Thank you both for answering these tough questions.
It's hard, yes.
In closing, what would you like the voters of the 43rd District to remember about you as they go to the polls in November? You have 2 minutes for your closing remarks. And Dan, we will start with you.
Thank you. So I'm Dan Foley. I'm running for the 43rd District, Montgomery County and Preble County. I think that I have bipartisan support in my campaign because I believe that I've taken my jobs in public service seriously. And I am not going to go to Columbus to have a title. I want to go to Columbus to do the work. And I really want to focus on things like mental health reform. My wife and I have 2 daughters, and our oldest daughter has struggled with some mental health issues. And she's been public about this. As a parent, I've understood that there are gaps in the mental health system. I want to really be a champion to improve mental health, particularly for young kids, because I think that's when you can really impact people's lives at the best time. I also want to be an advocate for more funding for public education and also to make sure that we keep Medicaid expansion. There are about 20,000 plus people in this district on Medicaid expansion, or on Medicaid writ large, and Medicaid expansion has been a great success by getting people care when they need it. And I'm worried that there are some political forces in Columbus that want to try to get rid of that, and so I'm going to be an advocate for keeping Medicaid. I'll work in a bipartisan manner, and I'll try my best to listen and then to act. I'm Dan Foley, and I'm asking for your support on November 6th.
Thank you, Dan. And Todd, what would you like the voters of the 43rd District to remember about you as they go to the polls in November?
Well, 8 years ago, when the Democrats were in total control of our state and even in our nation, Ohio lost over 400,000 jobs and we were financially broke. Under the last 8 years of Republican leadership, we've added over 500,000 jobs to Ohio, cut over $5 billion in taxes, and now have a firm financial standing and are one of the best states in this country to do business. We want to see that trend continue. We can't go back to the anti-business, tax and spend, top-down approach that the Democrats generally give us. And what really hurts me is this, being involved in politics, and I know I would say the same thing that Dan has this heart. When you walk through District 43 and you see people who seemingly have been left behind, who have been ignored, or who in repressed circumstances, that as a minister especially, or even as just an American, that hits our heart. And if you've ever, like me, walked into the slum areas of Nairobi, Kenya, or walked into the repressed areas of Nicaragua or Romania, my first years of ministry, working inner city in Louisville, and then 3 more years inner city in Hamilton, it really hurts to see people who have not been served well by local and state politics. But this is what politicians do. They come around every 4 years, want your vote, and then you don't see them every 2 or 4 or 6 years of their service. And the criticism that I've received from some of my opponents, and even some from the Democratic Party, is that I have no political experience. And I will agree with them on this. I have no experience in raising taxes on people who are already repressed by an inept government. And I have no experience in taking power away from people at the local level and consolidating it to either the county or the state level. And I have no experience saying something to you here now and then going to Columbus and saying something different. And this is my promise to you. I will never become an experienced politician. That's why I'm running, and that's why I ask you to vote for me, J. Todd Smith, this November 6th, to remain your state representative. Thank you.
Thank you both for your participation today, and good luck in your campaigns. The goal of the League of Women Voters is to educate the voting public and strengthen our elective political process. We are nonpartisan, meaning that we never support or oppose any candidate or party. We encourage everyone to vote. There are several ways to cast your ballot. By absentee ballot. Every registered voter should have received an absentee ballot application from the Secretary of State in September. If you did not receive the absentee form, you can download one from the Secretary of State's website. You can also vote early at your Board of Elections beginning October 10th. And the polls open at 6:30 a.m. on Election Day, Tuesday, November 6th, and close at 7:30 p.m. Last but not least, the League would like to thank DATV for partnering with us once again to present these candidate interviews. They volunteer their time, expertise, and equipment to make this possible. Thanks for watching, and be sure to vote.